welcome back to Haunted and Historic Australia for our second episode in the Criminals, Cutthroats and Convicts series, Sydney Park Serial Killers. In this episode, we take a look at the second victim, Bessie O'Connor. We ended our last episode with the death of the second victim for December 1932, Bessie O'Connor. Now, to Sydney residents, Bessie wasn't just some streetwalker beaten to death by a client. Elizabeth O'Connor grew up in Sydney's eyes. Nicknamed Bessie, she was born in the September of 1915. She and her family were known to the Randwick Coogee Swimming Club. Bessie had been swimming there since she was a toddler, along with her brother Arthur, who was, at the time of her death, the state diving champion. Bessie was an aspiring Olympian with many medals and trophies already acquired. Her ambition was to make it to the Olympics, but sadly this dream would never be realised. Bessie was the second eldest of 4 children. Her parents divorced when the children were young. Swimming was a distraction to the family discomfort at home. Home being between 2 houses, that of their mother Patience and father Arthur Sr., living in separate homes. It was around the time of her 16th birthday, just 2 months before, that her father had died. Things would have been tough for the family, who lived at Holden Street in Redfern. Bessie worked in a factory to help the family. They continued with life as best they could. Bessie, however, had a secret. On the day of the 14th of December, only 4 days after the brutal murder of May Miller, also known as Iris Marriott, Bessie, who had been home all day, left her home around 6:30 to go to the Coogee Aquarium, where she often swam of an evening. At around 9 p.m, she spoke to the manager's wife before leaving the aquarium to go home, not giving any indication she was in a rush or going anywhere else. She left around 9 p.m. and made it home in 15 minutes, quicker than she usually would. Her usual tram ride would have taken much longer, indicating to police that she was picked up from the aquarium or along the way and driven home, possibly even by her murderer. Once home, she spoke briefly to her mother, Patience, before tossing her costume onto her bed and stating on the way out to her mother she wouldn't be gone long. Her mother watched the clock when she was not home after an hour or so, saying Bessie was a quiet and reserved girl with no boyfriends and hadn't had an interest in getting one. She did have a male acquaintance named Frank, but it was nothing serious. Sadly, her mother would never see her daughter alive again. The movements from here are based on witness testimony. A man by the name of Lawrence told police later he had seen a girl matching her description on Holden Street, run from a car to her home and back to the car that was situated on the corner of Holden and Everleigh Streets in Redfern. Next, she was sighted by a man named Harvey, who owned a service station in South Sydney, stating he had seen the girl in a blue Essex sedan with a man. They were there only a moment getting fuel before heading off towards Tom Ugly Point at around 9:30 p.m. This blue Essex car would later be located by police as the car that had been reported stolen by the owner from Centennial Park between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. that night, strangely returned to the location sometime afterwards. A woman named Elizabeth Watts, owner of a kiosk at Tom Ugly's Point, stated that she saw the girl come to order sandwiches. She found her quite attractive and observed her as she came out of the kiosk with the sandwiches that she then shared with a man on the veranda. Mrs. Watts said she smiled at Bessie and Bessie smiled back. Her hair was in the style of Mrs. Watts' sister, and she observed her in great detail. Of the man that was with her, she stated he had been looking through the shop window. He looked of Irish descent, with broad features across the forehead. When they left by car, they travelled in the direction of George's River Bridge, and stated this was between 10 and 10:30 that night. The car, she would later state, looked like that of the photo she was shown of the blue Essex, others in their testimony had stated. of the car stolen that night. What we know as fact was that she was driven to the Royal National Park in Sutherland, where most likely she was attacked. Tyre marks were tracked onto Farnell Avenue, where after a way they stopped. There, police find indications of a scuffle on the ground, drag marks and a lock of hair that matched Bessie's. Not far away, sadly, her body would be located, hidden behind bushes, stripped of clothing, and several injuries to the head. Found by a Mr. McNamara at 9 a.m. the next morning, a woman covered in blood, flies and ants about her face, but still alive. He contacted police and she was rushed to St George's Hospital. Not far from her body was a ticket stub for the Georges River or Tom Ugley's Bridge. Police were by her bedside, but say she died before ever regaining consciousness due to the head injuries sustained and exposure to the elements all night. However, her mother, Patience, said that while she was with her daughter for the last moments of her life, she whispered the name Frank, or called out to him under her breath before she died. Frank the acquaintance. The mother insisted that Mr. Frank Curtis was not her sweetheart, only a friend. Did the police look into this? Questions the police had went unanswered. They had to interview witnesses and family to try and work out what happened. But none of the newspapers I looked through stated that Frank Curtis was questioned. Perhaps he was and had an alibi. Otherwise, they didn't have an interest in him for it. Did Bessie know the man? If not, why would she accept a car ride from a stranger? Surely she had been taught not to talk to them. Although things did seem a lot safer back in those days, doors left unlocked, everyone knew each other on the streets, and most people from that area knew Bessie too, especially at the aquarium. Then the next question, why would she tell her mother she would not be long and then knowingly be hours? Could she have asked to go home at some point and the man decided on other plans? Or was it that she believed at first she was in control of the situation? Perhaps an intended meeting for money, something she didn't want her family knowing about, but it went horribly wrong. How does a quiet girl with no boyfriend end up in a car with a strange man, a killer? Was she rebellious after her father died? Was she not making enough money at the factory? Her brother Arthur also had a job to help out. Was the money not enough for home or swinging dreams? Police arrested a man, Eric Roland Craig, for the murder of May Miller. He admitted he may have, in a fight with May Miller, lost his mind and beat her, but it was in self-defence. Now, Eric was also being accused of Bessie's murder. Could they make the charge stick? He too had stolen an Essex car to commit the murder. Although he stated it was an accident or self-defence, there were so many similarities between the two murders. Eric's trial went for some time, and we'll actually have an episode dedicated to him and his trial later on. Bessie had a secret, but it wasn't a secret from a mother. Patience O'Connor broke down during Eric's trial about a year after the murder and admitted to the court that she knew that her daughter was up to something late at night. She said Bessie would go out for hours at night. She had income from an unknown source and had been to the Sutherland Royal National Park before. Sydney was shocked. The little girl who grew up in the water in front of their eyes had been secretly working as a woman of the night. At the tender age of 16, Bessie was organising men to pick her up and take her to different areas in exchange for money. Perhaps almost innocent at first, it was things that she could handle, and then it became too much to bear. Did Bessie deny the wrong man? And of the blue Essex? It was taken out of a garage near to Centennial Park. The area from which it was stolen was a quiet area with a cliff edge close by. Police believed that the man who stole the car lived in the vicinity at that time, as they knew the roads very well, taking the car away from the houses so he wouldn't be heard, then returned it close to where it was stolen and still undetected. When the owner, Lionel Albert Downey, located his car, he found blood on the back of the passenger seat as well as hair and bone inside the car. This may have meant that Bessie was attacked in the back seat of the car, or a weapon used was placed in the car and disposed of later. While Eric was held in jail for the murder, another inmate comes forward and says to him that he knows someone who had evidence relating to the murder and he could clear his name of Bessie's crime. With this information, Eric appeals. The police are taken through a Da Vinci-style goose chase through 3 different properties in Sydney to find the evidence hidden under rubble in someone's backyard. To obtain a tyre lever, a handkerchief with the initials BO embroidered on it, and pants. Although the head wound may have been caused by a tyre lever, the handkerchief was not Bessie's. As per her mother's confirmation, her handkerchiefs were initialed BOC. The pants that had been washed since turned up with no blood on them. They were back to square one. Some witnesses came forward and stated that later in the evening on the 14th of December, a man calling himself George had broken down and walked to Tom Ugley's bridge, asking for assistance with petrol. He seemed really nervous. 2 men standing at Tom Ugley's point couldn't assist him with petrol, but pointed to a bus driver who had arrived. The bus driver assisted by siphoning petrol from his bus and handing it to the man in a jerry can. One of the men offered to drive the man back to his car. The witness could tell that the man was clearly agitated and wanted to get to Liverpool, he stated. When they arrived at the man's car, the witness noticed it was a bluey-green Essex, and when he saw the papers, he suspected he may have been the murderer, and the men went to police. Police eventually gave up on the case. They had Eric. At the end of the day, Bessie O'Connor had put herself in harm's way, and as a result was murdered. And it was so similar to May Miller. It was also very similar to the murder earlier that year of a Miss Hilda White, who we will feature in our next episode. So stay tuned for Sydney Park Serial Killer.